afternoon. Thank you. I'd like to start by saying a huge thank you to the headmaster for inviting me today to speak to you, as well as to the governors, the Deputy Lord Lieutenant, the Mayor, invited guests, parents, and of course, the boys. As I returned to Speech Day for the first time in 20 years, an event which I was sure I'd finally seen the back of. But really, it's a great honour to be here, and it's a great honour in part because Merchant Taylors has always been a huge part of my life. I started studying here when I was just 4 years old at Stanford. I continued to finish my A-levels, so 14 years of my life. My brother, he also studied here, that's another 14 years. My dad taught here for 36 years, 11 as an archivist. My niece even attends Stanford today. And my mum put up with us throughout the whole thing. And even recently, I was lucky enough to join the Merchant Taylors company in London. So it almost felt like Merchants was part of the family, but if it was at 78 years of involvement, it would be the oldest member of the family. But it's also an honour because Speech Day is an important day. I know it can sometimes be a bit arduous, and I'll try not to contribute to that, but it's an important day for two reasons. Number one, because it's a day of celebration. As has been said, it's a great day to recognise the achievements of the boys who are getting prizes today. But it's also a day of reflection. Because as you progress through school, you experience so much change, whether to yourself or to the world around you. And Speech Day can start to become a kind of reassuring rhythm through that day, where each time it happens, you can reflect on the 12 months before. And every boy here, award or not, will have achieved over the last 12 months, whether academically or personally. So I want to start by congratulating every single one. Now, when I was asked to speak today, it was also an opportunity for me to reflect. Because what could I possibly tell the boys today? What advice could I give when the world that you're in is so different to the one that I was in when I left 20 years ago? Now, the world's on completely different. We had mobile phones too, but they didn't have social media, they didn't have cameras. Our exploits were consigned to physical photos with negatives that could be very easily destroyed. And a lot of them were, otherwise I probably wouldn't have been invited back. But also I suspect that the boys here today are more familiar with change than I was at your age. And, I mean, as has been mentioned, if you have any doubt about that, ask first years who barely half a term into their tenure at school have already experienced 2 monarchs and 3 prime ministers. And I had to debate that part of the speeches. But these differences, I came to realize, they're not the things that separate our experiences, they're the things that actually connect them. Because for all the change you experience as you progress through the school, that change doesn't stop when you leave, it continues. And so I decided that rather than bore you with a detailed summary of my CV or pepper you with platitudes, I would try and give you one message today for the future, and that's a message about change, but more specifically about your agency within it, about your ability to shape your futures. Because no matter what subjects you choose to study, what university or apprenticeship you go on to, or career you want to pursue, the only thing that is predictable about the future is its very unpredictability. Now that might sound a bit scary and doom and gloomy, but the good news is everyone's in the same boat. And having reflected on my own time in school, I came to realize the reason why it wasn't that scary in the end. And it was because around all the lessons, all the exams, all the things I was taught, the most important education I got wasn't even on the curriculum. It was a silent education. Because it wasn't about subjects teaching me what to learn. It was about the entire school experience teaching me how to learn. And once you have that, unpredictability is much more manageable. Now, this might come as a bit of a surprise coming from an architect, because it's a career path that's vocational, it's just about the most predictable career path you can take. But the choice to study it was as much a surprise to me as it was even to my parents. Because when I started school, I didn't particularly excel academically. I was mostly interested in drawing and doodling on any piece of paper that possibly was. Over time, I started to enjoy the sciences and the arts, particularly design technology. But there wasn't any one particular project, I think, that was really the key. More than that, it was the way in which they overlapped. It was the blurry edges between the subjects. And at the time, I didn't really know what would be a subject that welcomed that kind of interest. And then on a slightly rainy weekday afternoon in November, similar to today, me and my parents went to careers evening. And every single one of my teachers independently suggested that I study architecture. Now, that had two immediate effects. Number one, for the first time, I got to see the blood simultaneously drain out of both of my parents' faces, as they realized that their youngest son might be about to commit to a minimum of 7 years of university. In the end, it was 12. Because of extra degrees, I didn't fail. But not only that, the second thing was that it set me on this path where I thought it was going to be incredibly predictable. I was going to have so much control over it. I knew what my future was going to be. But then, when I graduated architecture school 7 years later, I did so with what can only be described as spectacularly poor timing. I graduated into the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression. And it was a time when a third of all architects in the country were either unemployed or underemployed. Now, it had been my dream to start my own design studio, but I had to adapt my plan because given how the world had changed, I realized it wasn't going to happen. So I needed to get a job, be an employee, and work my way through the ranks and get as much experience as I could. Now, I was fortunate enough to get a job, and I was fortunate enough to continue to get really interesting projects to work on. Everything from skyscrapers to houses and schools. And then in 2014, I took on what turned out to be my last project as an employee. The project was to redesign the main entrance of the Natural History Museum in London. And it was a dream project, but again, change happened. Now, this was a fantastic project. It was one where it taught me a lot of skills, not that many of them transferable, to be fair, because one of the greatest challenges was getting an actual elephant carcass through a live construction site through a very small door. Not your typical architecture project, but if anyone does find themselves having to do that, treat it a lot like getting a sofa in a house. But in the background of that project, which lasted 4.5 years, the effect of that financial crisis was starting to become tangible. Now, I was trained as an architect, I was trained in how cities and buildings work, and yet all around me, I could see the nature of our cities changing. We had 1 in 5 libraries across the country closed, 2,000 public toilets were gone, half of councils were forced to sell parkland, and homelessness was increasing to levels we'd never before seen. But strangely, it wasn't my job as an architect to do anything about this, because as an architect, nobody actually comes to you to ask you what should happen. They come to you to ask you to design what is going to happen. And so I wanted to do something about this. I wanted to find a new way of practicing outside of the traditional model. And I got the opportunity in 2017. I was made what's called a designer in residence at the Design Museum. And essentially what that means is each year, the Design Museum of London selects 4 emerging designers from around the country. And I asked you to respond to a one-word brief for 1 year. And the brief that year was support. Now, I knew I had a range of different things that I thought I wanted to look at, all caused by this shift in how the cities are working. But I wasn't sure which way I would go, and then I had a bit of an epiphany. It was one night when I was working late at the museum, and because we were designers and residents, we got to stay there, have the whole museum to ourselves. And I was walking around the permanent exhibition with the whole place, just alone. I saw all these design classics, these absolutely icons of design. And then I saw a row of chairs, classic chairs, the Corbusiers, the Rietvels, the Mies van der Rohes, the kind of things that define eras. And I got struck with this sudden realization that surely we, as a society, have solved the problem of a chair. Right? I mean, I've never been short of a chair, and yet every day I'd walk into the museum and I'd walk past dozens of people bedding down for the night because they didn't have anywhere to live. They didn't have anywhere to live. Now that struck me as not only an urgent problem, but also a very, very architectural one. And so I set out to look in more detail at this, but how could I possibly intervene when I'm fortunate enough that I've never been before? Well, I spent about 8 months going up and down the country. And I spoke to hundreds of people who were homeless. I spoke to frontline charity workers, spoke to policymakers, MPs, lords, financial regulators, postal operators, anybody who would listen. But the things that I learned weren't about their own expertise. It was about the blurry edges in between. And by speaking across the spectrum of all these different people, I was able to zoom out a little and see what the main issues were. And there were three main things that I learned about homelessness that completely shook my understanding. The first was just the sheer scale. So 1 in 200 people in this country face some form of homelessness. But secondly, it was the reality of the situation. When we think of homelessness, we tend to think of a person bedding down on the street, but rough sleeping on the street is actually the minority of cases. Most people are either going from sofa to sofa or in temporary accommodation that's substandard, where they can be moved in as little as a day. The thing that ties all these things together is instability. And within that, and the third thing I should say, is the vast majority of people who enter into homelessness do so completely capable of recovery. Mental health and substance abuse, those are caused by homelessness, not causes of it. And so why, my question was, weren't people actually recovering? And this is when I found that role of an address. A little bit of information, a snippet of data. We don't even really think about it, but it's gone from being some way to describe a location to a de facto form of ID. So when you become homeless today, not only do you lose your home, you also lose your address, and with it the ability to get healthcare, to apply for jobs, benefits, posts, all the fundamental elements of a safety net, all the things that you need to recover are taken away at the very point when you need it most, because of the very reason that you need it. It's a cruel catch-22. So I designed a system called proxy address. Now, essentially it allows people facing homelessness to borrow an address, not the property, but just the address. But the way it connects through all those different environments and all those different people I was speaking to, that's the key about it. And those addresses can be long-term empty properties, it can be construction sites where they're not yet finished, it can even be public donations. And with it, those people facing homelessness can have access, uninterrupted access to all those services they need to recover. Now, we recently completed our first pilot of the system in London, and we are told to expect around 20 to 25% of people to recover after 6 months. What we actually got is over 95% of people using proxy address recovered from homelessness in 6 months. We had people who had been homeless for years, who suddenly found homes, found jobs, found careers, started at university, built families, essentially returned to a point where they could be happy, healthy, and independent again. Now, as the headmaster mentioned, it was voted one of Time Magazine's best inventions of the year, joining the likes of Apple, Google, and the COVID vaccine. And today, we're planning to expand it across the UK and maybe even beyond. But I would never have expected to be where I am today if you'd asked me if I was where you are today. An architect who builds buildings, but also works directly with those who are excluded from them. And I can't tell you where you will be in 20 years either. The youngest among you won't retire until 2079. And nobody, not you, not your teachers, not me, can tell you what the world will be like then. But as you continue on your journey, as you choose what subjects to study, what to do after school, you can do so knowing that the silent education that runs through it all, whatever subject you've chosen, whatever university you go to, it's the basis from this school that helps bind it all together and make sure that you can not only use what you've learned, but knowing that you can always continue to learn in the future. And with that comes not only the ability to change your life, but hopefully also the lives of those around you. So on that note, I want to congratulate you all again, because whatever the future is, you've already begun to be equipped to do it. Thank you.